Hi everyone, Teri Wellbrock of the Healing Place podcast. Just wanted to touch base before today's episode and a powerful conversation. We recorded it in September, which is Suicide Awareness Month, and it's coming out here in October. But we always need to be aware of suicide and those who might be hurting and struggling. So just wanted to reiterate that critical, important message of supporting one another and being there for one another and knowing the signs and what resources are available for helping those who might be struggling. All right, such a great, funny conversation today. I love this conversation, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. A little PS too is if you are on TikTok, be sure to find Teri Wellbrock on TikTok as well. I'm doing an Understanding Aces series right now, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, be sure to go check that out on TikTok. Thanks. Now for the show. Welcome everybody to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and so very excited to have with me today Meghan Judge, and she is mental health advocate, trauma survivor, and podcast host, Judging Meghan. So welcome.
Hi, Teri. So nice to be on your show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. You and I were just celebrating the fact your show is in the top 1%. Woohoo! That's my goal. And
you're going to do it.
Big kudos to you for reaching that, because I think the work you do, the light you're shining is so very needed in this world.
100%, and vice versa. The more people that we get talking about mental health and trauma and overcoming trauma, the better off we will be as a society, and it won't be frowned upon and people won't be so opinionated on it. So that's my life's mission.
Yes. Well, I remember the first time I went to put my truths out there. I just decided to put my toe in the water a little bit and put some stuff out on Facebook, and 95% of the people were just so embracing or private messaged me and said, "Oh my God, me too." But then you had that little small percentage that was just like, la, 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 we don't want to talk about this. We don't want to hear it. Don't know. No. And so, but gosh, putting the truth about trauma out there.
100%. I love that you pointed that out, because I do put my whole life out there, and except my kids, I try not to really put my kids out there because that's not their choice. I might tell stories sometimes on the podcast about being a mom, but I have had people give me it's almost like people don't believe you. It's a weird thing. It's like you said, 95% of people are like, that's great. And some people just don't say anything, and that's fine. But the people that kind of go after you, I don't know if you've had that happen. It's very strange. I'm like, that's about you,
Yes.
It doesn't happen often, but it has happened to me, to be honest with you.
I've had a few, especially with my mom's addiction, and when we were traveling through that, and she's now 4 years sober at 86. But when I started to first put that journey out there, it was not even close relatives, but distant relatives that were like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe you're airing your dirty laundry." And it was like, no, this is helping other people who have grown up with alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever in their households, and the trauma that the impact that has.
It's also a generational thing. So my mom's generation or whoever's generation, up until really recently, people, I would say COVID was when people were like, "I'm tired of pushing this down. I'm talking about it." So that's one really good thing that came out of it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you mind sharing your story of from trauma to triumph?
No, not at all. So it's a mouthful. So I'm going to tell your listeners, sit back. And stop me, because sometimes I hate it when I have people come on and they just spill their guts, and you're like, we have a long period of time to talk about this. You like to kind of break it up. So if you want to stop me, please do.
You tell it however you feel you need to tell it.
Okay. So my trauma really started for me at the age of 2. So I was like a little younger than 2. And my mom, my little sister had a very rare liver disease, which now they actually can operate on, but at the time they could not. So my sister Amora had come back from the hospital. She had just had a surgery. It wasn't a major surgery, it was a minor surgery. Something with the bilirubin. I don't know what the actual surgery was, but my mom went upstairs to get her out of her crib and she had passed.
Oh,
And so my mom, she was 9 months and I was less than 2 because we were 9 months apart. And my mom was in such agony and shock that she ran downstairs out onto the lawn, screaming, hysterical. Um, the paramedics, like ambulances came, and I just was stuck in a high chair.
oh,
So I think I know from talking to my mom that eventually a neighbor came over and helped. My dad and my older sisters were at doing something, and so they weren't home. And that really was the start of what I've been diagnosed as in the past several years as my journey with complex PTSD. So I went on to just always be from that age, like, I was completely potty trained. I was a happy baby, didn't really have issues, completely went backwards. So needed to be potty trained. Was very fussy after that. I turned into a really hard toddler. And I was having like reoccurring dreams up until like I was about 10 that I took my baby sister, walked her down a hallway and flushed her down a toilet.
oh,
So yeah, so the amount of trauma that they did to my young brain, because they say, the first 3 years of a human being's life, if there's trauma, it's like the worst time actually, because your brain and the development isn't there, to be able to deal and function with it. So I went on to like, have some issues in school and, was running away, like that kind of stuff. I was kind of a hard kid after that. And when I turned 12, my dad, who was the best, was diagnosed with leukemia.
no.
So he suffered and went through 3 rounds of chemotherapy and he died 9 months later. And he was this like funny, fun, outgoing, like everybody in our neighborhood would come to our house. We were like the fun house. Um, so that happened. And then my mom remarried a psychotic, abusive stepfather, and he was an alcoholic and very hated my brother and I, who were the 2 that were still at home at the time. And it was really hard. And then I kind of was sent away to boarding school and all that stuff. But I had met my very best friend the day after my dad passed away. Her name was Julie, and we were like the best of friends. And I say a lot on the podcast, I talk about soulmate mates and signs and all of that stuff. And I have always said soulmates don't have to be a husband or a lover. They can be a best friend
Yeah.
or so to this day, I'm like, she was my soulmate. Anyways, she got pregnant in her 20s and was married, newly married, and they got pregnant with my godson. And she went into the hospital to go and went into labor, and they injected, like, went to put the epidural, but they didn't connect the 2 tubes. So the strep virus got into the tubes, and basically what happened was her brain swelled because it got into her spinal cord. And I had to fly cross country 2 days later because she was declared brain dead. So my first like 30 years of my life were just extremely, extremely, extremely traumatic. Just it was like every decade I expected something to happen. And I've kind of gone on to be like that. And really what happened was, like, long story short, I ended up kind of escaping all of this stuff and being like, I'm married. I'm happily married. Thank God. I have a great husband and I live by the beach in Southern California. And I had 2 babies. I did have some fertility issues because I had struggled with an eating disorder for several years, but in my teens and 20s, but I was okay, and I was like, oh, everything's fine. I don't have anything wrong with me. Like, I don't need to go into therapy. I'm happy. I live by the beach and I met all these like mom friends and I thought I was like really having this great life. Excuse me. And then what happened was there was a horrific woman that I thought was my closest friend, and she was just a total mean girl. And she like planned this trip and didn't include me. And then all the other friends took sides. And what it did was it made me like really isolate and really go into a place where I trusted this person. I had massive abandonment issues, and she just didn't care and hurt me and has never apologized, never will, which is awful. But a bunch of women just like pounced and then it was on. And then after that happened, like, to make this as brief as possible, I ended up realizing I didn't want to be here anymore. And so one day I was sitting on the beach with my 2 kids. And, it was like all I ever dreamed about as a young girl was to be a mom and, have 2 little girls. And I was at my favorite place in the world, which is the beach, looking out. And I just said, I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. I can't. And that's when I really just was like, I'm not going out this way, you know? And I was already in therapy, but I really decided to take my life back. And that's when I started my podcast. And that's kind of like, long story short, where I am today.
Wow. Wow. One, there was so much to that I related to, because the last part about the friendship, I had a friend for 7 years that was my best friend that just ghosted me. And man, the abandonment issues that came up from that. And of all the traumas I've been through, from rape and sexual molestation and bank robberies and murder and all of that, that was the one that like was the cherry on top of the crap cake, because I had literally like given her my heart as a friend, where the other people, they were just, bank robbers or creepy neighbors or whatever. But this was someone I had entrusted. So, wow, that really spoke to me, and my heart hugs yours for having endured that.
It's when I meet women, to be honest with you, I have more women come up to me, or, that listeners or people I know that are like, that happened to me too. It's a crazy thing, but it is interesting that you say that, because I went through all that other stuff and I was still on the planet. Like the death of my dad, the death of my very best friend, who was my whole world. But what I found was I was trying to replace Julie with somebody that wasn't Julie.
Right.
And it really had nothing to do with me, because I'm a freaking good friend. Like my friends that I have, or I've known my whole life, will tell you I'm a good friend. But the worst part about that is like, even though I live by the beach, it was like a pile-on of women that took sides and being like, oh, she's crazy because she's upset and hurt because she wasn't included. And this is somebody that, like, our families, we spent every weekend with them going to the beach. She would say I was her closest friend. And then it was like, I was just dropped, and hurt. And that pain, like you talk about, was the worst kind of pain I have ever experienced in my life, because I have spent so much of my life trying to like make other people laugh and be relevant, like be the center of attention and be fun at parties and be like fun Meghan. And then it was like everybody that wanted to be my friend and thought I was fantastic and fabulous and would come to my giant party I threw for charity every year, they just all went, goodbye, we're done, you're crazy. I called somebody a bad name at a party because I was drinking a lot, that I lean on alcohol like a lot of trauma survivors do. And I called somebody a name because she kind of grabbed me by my ribs and I snapped. And it was when I was going through like the thick of the betrayal, because the girl that basically dumped me, her new best friend was there, that she had replaced my family with the other girl's family. Like we were just completely erased. And I called this person, I'm not going to cuss on your podcast, but an effing loser. And then the next thing you know, this girl that I called the queen of all Karens, she was so desperate to be relevant in this like group and society, which is so stupid. We're all in our 40s. She just trashed me. She trashed me to the admin of my kids' school. My kids are in Catholic
Oh
school.
my gosh.
It was awful. It was awful. So hence why all of the like boiled up trauma like came
Sure.
to a boiling point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I just have a question. I'll put you on the spot, but you can always just say no. But do you think that that happened so that it was, I don't know, an angel whisper or God kick in the butt or whatever, to bring it all to the surface so that it was time to finally deal with it all, to finally come to a healing place?
It is so crazy that you say that, but 100% yes. And I'm very spiritual. I mean, I believe in God. I think that God got me through whatever people believe, whatever it is. I always respect that. But for me, my spirituality, my angels, whoever it be, helped me get through this
Mhm.
horrific experience. And I'm still struggling with it, to be honest. And it's been several years. But I do think, it happened for a reason, like everything does, but this happened for a reason, which it was like the worst pain, like the worst agony that I can
Yes.
ever explain to anyone. I wouldn't wish this. I actually, when I'm angry, I would wish it upon the queen of all Karens and some of the women that have been so mean, but I wouldn't really wish it on them because I don't it's such horrible pain that it's like I don't want to see somebody else like want to take their own life, if that makes
Right.
sense. But what I learned from it was I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to become a better person.
Yes.
That's what I learned from it. And honestly, I'm not perfect. I'm so heavily flawed, believe me. Like we all are. But I know for a fact I can look in the mirror every night and be like, I like you a lot more than I did a couple years ago. I don't like love you yet. Like we still have some work to do, but I really like you and I know that you're trying. And I couldn't say that a couple years ago. I was kind of like a mean girl. I was in this like clique of like old lady moms that thought they were cool. And, like everyone would go to dinner and talk crap about the other person. And I would kind of put my head on the pillow at night and go, that wasn't very nice what I said about so and so tonight.
Right.
So, it changed me. I think really it was for the better, even though it sucked going
Yes.
through it.
Oh,
Yeah.
girl, I swear, like I'm just like so you just see me he's sitting here shaking my head yes
Yeah.
because I so get it. Like it rocks your world
Yeah.
and just turns it upside down. But yes, I know the reason I asked that question was because I know for me, once I got through that, just the heartache. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. I cried nonstop for a year. Like it was
Yeah.
so hard. And once I finally got over that hurdle, I mean, and it took a while. Yeah, like I took a step back and said, "Oh, this totally needed to happen." I now get that. As hard as it
Yeah.
was, yeah, but a shift then occurred. Yeah.
And I think too that women like can be so nurturing and loving to each other and so wonderful in so many ways, right? There's been so many women in my life, like Julie, my best friend that passed, or, my sisters, or my best friends I've known my whole life, like since I was a kid, or my college friends. There's so many women that have like, I've encountered in my life that are like, I love you. You're great. You're funny. You're this, you're that. And they're like, you're just the way you are, and vice versa. And that's what like being a true friend is. It doesn't mean we're
Yes.
not going to fight and not get along all the time, or not think one's annoying on a trip, on a road trip or something. But to be to like to be a woman is really hard, because women can be so jealous and so mean, so
Right.
cruel, you know. And the thing with my friend breakup is I'll never have a why. I'll never have a why. It
Me
sounds like
either.
you won't have a why either. And you just kind of have to get to a place where you have to be like, I'm never going to have a why. I'm never going to understand why you did this. And when I say you, it's because I've spent years being like, well, what did I do in this? Why did this
Yes.
happen? And I didn't do anything. And that's the thing that sucks, is I did not deserve the treatment. I don't deserve the way that people treated me afterwards. And that's, I think, what the pain, what the real pain is. It's just not having a why. Whereas when somebody dies, or you said you were robbed, or you went through alcohol, like a parent that was an alcoholic, you have a why. You don't have a why when somebody just that you trusted with your whole being just goes, I'm done, you
Right.
know. That's
Right.
hard. And especially when you're somebody that already has like trauma, you know, trauma, people that are survivors of trauma tend to have abandonment issues, and mine were huge. So like maybe if I wasn't the person that I am and I didn't have the abandonment issues, I could have just walked away and been like, screw her, and just shut up and not told people how much she hurt me, you know?
Yes. Right. Oh, they're so powerful. And what a great message, because like you said, there are so many people tuning in right now and listening to this who are shaking their head and probably tears in their eyes and saying, "Oh my gosh, somebody gets me." Like I've had this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Very,
It's
very
not fun.
powerful.
It's not
No.
fun.
Oh my goodness gracious. I guess just, putting our truths out there and what an impact. So I think your show, I mean, I'm guessing is so impactful, and why you're having such success with it is the fact that you're putting those truths out there. And now do you put healing strategies out as well? And
I
um
don't think so. I don't think I really give strategies. I think like 95. So I'm almost at I think I'm in almost at 90. So I've done 90 podcasts. I think that I don't I do, because I always think I'm like, you know, going to give some advice on something. I don't give strategies. It's more that I just talk about the fact that we all are here for such a short period of time, right? And the whole point of why I started it was to be like, I can't be alone. There's other trauma survivors. Like people go through loss, they go through grief, they go through friend breakups, they go through a breakup of a husband, they go through divorce, they go through it's, and you never really know what somebody's going through. So I felt like a calling almost to do this, because I was creative my whole life. Like that's kind of why I ended up starting it. I was an actress when I was young, and a singer, and I was in therapy, and I adore my therapist. And she was like, Megan, you've been creative your whole life. You need to be creative again. You need to like do something. And I didn't even know what a podcast was. No, I mean, I did, but I was like, they're so like, I didn't understand what they were really, except that I had a friend that had one. And I was like, I'm going to start like I had been writing ideas and all this stuff. And she was like, you should start a podcast. Cause I always was like, I mean, I thought it was pretty funny, and I do think I'm pretty funny. So I was like, I'm going to use my humor and tell stories about me just being an idiot, because I am. I'm constantly like I'm like, I'm a mom of two little girls, and I'm like, can't craft, I can't cook. I'm constantly like running. I was joking that I would run over cones at carpool. So I always start the episodes about like something I did that was probably pretty ridiculous. And then I go into the stories of people, like whether it be, you know, somebody that was trapped in the burning Twin Towers, you know, rescuing Wilhelmino, who I'm thinking of September 11th because it just passed, but you know, he lived his life in service, was a Port Authority police officer, rescued, went into those twin towers knowing that a plane had crashed and was trapped under the rubble for 13 hours. Like, how do you go on? I had to get to the bottom of like really how people go on, or you with your own story, which I know you're going to come on my podcast, but how do you go on after you were robbed, and how do you go on after all these things? I had to do this. It was like my calling, if that makes sense. Probably
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I laughed when you said about the podcast, because when I started this, it was with a therapist friend, and she was in her 20s and I was in my 40s. And she said, we should totally start a podcast. And I was like, awesome. What's a podcast? Because like, I have
Yeah.
no idea. What is it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also weird because you're like, I'm in this like I record mine at home. I now push mine to YouTube. I usually have no makeup on and I like look atrocious, but I'm like, I don't even care.
Right.
So I do them from my bedroom. And like I said, like my dog comes in, and it's a weird thing because you're like, I'm by myself. I know that people are listening to me. We just talked about this before we recorded. And I'm just going to like spill my guts. And I have no idea when I'm walking down the street, like what people know, or if they know my story, or they just aren't saying anything. It's very strange, right?
Yes.
Just knowing that people know all about you and you don't know in what part of the world they're listening, where you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, they're in Australia. It's very strange. It's a very strange feeling, but
Oh,
I love it.
I so
Yeah.
get it too. I said it recently to somebody that I was looking at like top 10 countries, and Denmark had popped in. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh my, to me, I think it's the coolest thing, but yes, just so crazy to think about. Like someone sitting down with their cup of warm ginger tea under a blankie with their headphones on, listening to me
Yeah.
talk. Like, what?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like part of me is like, like that's amazing. And then I sometimes I'm like, who are you? Will you please call me? Not call me, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
will you please message me because I want to know who you are and why you're listening. It's a very strange thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what a podcast was either.
No, I love it. That's so awesome. Like we have some serious soul sister connections
We
happening
totally
here. So
do. Yes. Yes. And I love it.
I love it too. That's really cool. So is there anything in particular that you wanted to talk about on the show today?
Well, I mean, I really am it's suicide prevention month. So September suicide prevention month. I share my story of how I did not want to be on this planet anymore. I'm very open about it. And I do that because I want people to know that it can get so bad that you don't want to go on. And I went through a period, I would say it was a solid 6 months of my life, where I would have these horrific panic attacks, and I would wake up, and I describe them as kind of like a machine kind of breaking down, or like a refrigerator where like a refrigerator goes blah, 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 and then it starts back up, like old school refrigerators. And I would have that happen to me every night. And I thought I was dying. Like I couldn't breathe. And then I would be up for hours and I would think about how I was going to leave the planet. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was almost like being in like a prison in my own mind. Part of me was like, thinking, well, you know, everyone would feel bad if I was gone. They would be the people that hurt me so much. They would finally like, understand what they did to me. Like that whole thing in your head where you're like, you know, and then people would feel bad, and then they would say they were sorry. It was like this. I can't even really put it to
No, I
words.
totally get it. I
Yeah.
I do. I've
And
traveled.
then I was in therapy, but I realized at one point I was like very anti-medication. I always kind of have been. And I realized I was like, I cannot live like this. Like I need to go on medication. And it doesn't mean forever. Like I'm not on medication right now. but it was the band-aid that I needed to be able to like kind of pull myself out of like the hell that I was in, because it was like a living hell. So when I do my podcast, or for this month specifically, the month of September, I just, you know, I really want people to understand that there's always hope. And I say to my listeners all the time, I had a guest a long time ago come on, and he told me something, and it's always stuck with me. He said, your piece of the puzzle matters. Like,
Oh,
your piece of the puzzle matters. You might not think you matter. It always makes me cry. You might not think that you matter, but you do matter. Like, there's a reason why you're still on this planet. And it's not it's not up to you to take your own life, because the world needs your puzzle piece. So I say that a lot to people. I just say, keep going. Like, you don't know what your days ahead. You haven't had your best day yet,
right.
you know? So I try to like really be somebody that kind of shares my own story. So if there is like one listener out there that's like at the point where they were like me, maybe I can help dissuade them from not getting help, you know?
Yes. I love the puzzle piece analogy. That's very
I do
powerful and
too.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. His name was Lucky Newell. He's a
Oh,
great guy. Yeah.
oh, I love it. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. So how do folks connect with you? Where can they find you and listen into your show?
So you can find me on my website, Judging Meghan, and Megan is Meghan, because I'm Irish and I spell it the right way. Sorry to all the Megans that don't. So judgingmegan.com, or you can listen to my podcast on Apple, Spotify, my website, basically all the places you can stream, Amazon. You can listen wherever, I think,
Right.
now. And then you can find me on Instagram at Judging Meghan. So pretty simple. And I
Awesome.
love when people reach out to me. So I don't, it makes me, it like lights up my soul when people reach out to me. So
I feel
I
the
love it.
same. I love it. If I
Yeah.
see an email, I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you kind of are like, that person in Bangladesh that's listening is
Yeah.
finally reaching out. It's a good feeling. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. And yeah, just putting your truths out there. And again, I just think it just helps people not feel so alone, and those soul connections happen. And it's just such a beautiful gift. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today and remind you to visit my website as well as the academy.teriwellbrock.com for the courses. But if you go to my website, teriwellbrock.com, you can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. Um, and just a great space for thanks for again being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye bye.